I am stocking up on all my smoke blends for the Etsy store. It's seasonal. I never know when I'm going to have any in. But one of the things that I was doing that started this whole new tangent is I was preparing to help people with addictions. And I have to be really careful about some of the claims I can make. And I have to say for YouTube, this is incense to be used in your particular incense burner, and that it's not for human consumption. Having said that, there's a lot of research that supports muscimol's role in learning and the production of acetylcholine, and acetylcholine's role in learning and brain enhancement. And so it's sending me on this whole tangent of the role that drugs play, ending the stigma that surrounds a mushroom versus a plant like nicotine, the shame around nicotine, which is actually shown to be nootropic and brain enhancing, the dosage levels that make the difference between brain enhancing, neurotoxic, addictive, and that all of these have different levels and different roles to play in the brain. And so one of the things that I wanted to discuss with you today is about muscimol's role in enhancing the brain and other things that you can use to help sort of start to repair the brain. And that goes off in one tangent, but then in another tangent is the whole shame around drug culture, drug use, drug experimentation, and the concept that certain drugs are good and certain drugs are bad, and that the reality is anything can be good and anything can be bad. And yes, there are some things that are like 90% really bad for you. And then there's other things that are like 90% really great for you, but that it's a spectrum. And so today I wanted to discuss with you nicotine. And the whole reason behind bringing it up is that I really want to include nicotine in several of my blends. One would be a brain enhancing blend, and then the other would be in the blend that is helping people with craving and addiction. And that one works over time. I found it kicked in around 2 weeks of using it twice a day. One lighting of the incense around the middle of the day and one lighting of the incense around the end of the day. After about 2 weeks, I was able to get off of nicotine when I was still thinking that smoking was 100% bad for you. And so what I understand now, after about 3 months of looking into this whole nicotine thing, is that the plant itself, the tobacco plant itself, it's just like any other powerful drug. And we are starting to learn this finally now when we're looking at the psilocybin drug. I'm trying to bring awareness to ibotenic acid as not 100% bad, but actually a good usable drug. And then its flip side in Amanita muscaria, and that's muscimol is a completely separate drug, and the role it can play and how it can be positive, that everything comes down to dosage. And we have to stop vilifying a drug just because society wants to max out its dose, and they're injecting ibotenic acid into animal brains and going, oh, it's killing their brain. Well, no shit, you're injecting a shit ton of it in there. And so I've done a little bit of discussing with you about ibotenic acid. I'm going to discuss it more, but there are people that have been using ibotenic acid to experiment with their ADD, ADHD successfully. And it's all dosage dependent. You know, the tobacco industry was born back in the 50s when what we knew about the brain was basically nothing. And what we knew about drugs was basically nothing. And they were saying marijuana would make you crazy. And they found nicotine was addictive and they thought, hey, cool. And then they just did this campaign knowing very little about cigarettes. And they thought, you know what? It is addictive. We know that much about tobacco, but let's make it even more addictive. And they added a lot of preservatives and to help give it shelf life. But then they also needed filler because that plant is expensive to grow. And so they added all these little filling agents in there to sort of pad the cigarette. Turns out they're highly toxic. And the preservatives were highly toxic. And then some of the ways that they used to process it were highly toxic. And then over time, people were sort of leveling out in their addiction to it. And so then they had to start experimenting with doping cigarettes with addictive agents, which were also toxic, but also addictive. When I was researching nicotine itself and the tobacco plant itself, I was having a really hard time finding anything that was off the grid, off the corporate cigarette thing. And so there's a huge freaking difference here, right? You've got the pure tobacco plant, and then you've got modern cigarettes. The two are not the same drug. Modern cigarettes are a highly toxic compound. So let's just talk about the tobacco leaf itself. Well, there's a reason why the indigenous peoples of North America revere it as the mother and the most holy and sacred of all of the plants, because it can help reduce your appetite. But now research is showing that it is a nootropic, that it enhances memory and learning. And so I have to be really careful about the links that I leave in the descriptions of my videos, as I have learned. I got another blocked out of my channel for a week because I left a link to an article about benzodiazepines being overprescribed. So I'm making a lot of statements here. I have to be careful. So what I did is I went on our forum and I started a whole new post about learning and nootropics and nicotine. And I'm leaving all my research there, and I'm going to continue working on this series and doing research on it, and I will drop everything there. If you're doing any research on this, if you're experimenting with nootropics and brain enhancement and healing and using nicotine and any of that stuff, please go comment there. To find the forum, go to the description. If you're on a phone, most people can't find it. There's a tiny little triangle facing with the point down. Right under here, you got to click that and it'll open up the description for you. And then you can find our forum. And I will leave a link to the actual post on the forum in the description of this video. But what I want you to also look at is Andrew Huberman. He was on a Joe Rogan podcast, number 1513. Really need to go, ignore this up here, those are old notes. You really need to go check him out and go check out that Joe Rogan podcast. It was really good. And in my own work with nicotine, I've learned, and I talk about this on the post in the forum, that it seemed like the more anxiety I had, the more fight or flight I had, the more I craved my cigarette. So we know that. You see nicotine addicts puffing away because stress, and it calms them down. And we always thought that that was just the dopamine. And it may be dopamine, but we also know that it does increase focus and attention, working memory, and the speed of your reaction time. If this is true, and it can help enhance our cognitive function when our fight or flight systems are trying to reduce our cognitive function. If tobacco is a sacred plant to the indigenous people of North America, and this mushroom also helps to improve our memory and our cognitive function, but also eyesight. Something is going on synergistically here when people are experimenting with it together. And I believe there's a reason, other than dopamine and addiction, why I crave nicotine. And there are certain people in the population that crave it and others that can just drop it and don't really notice and can live without it. I'm just beginning my research in all of this, but I can tell you, I definitely noticed a decline when I got off of nicotine. So I got off corporate cigarettes probably 20 years ago. And the times in my life when I have smoked, I've smoked American Spirit because they're just straight up tobacco. But even then, that's just too much, man. That's just, we weren't supposed to be doing it like that. So I wanted to put a smoking blend, nicotine-based blend together for my smoking blends, but I can't because nicotine is a controlled substance and it's regulated and I can't sell it. I would have to heavily tax it and, get permission from the government and all that, and I'm not gonna do that. But you can get tobacco. And you can add it to one of my incense smoking blends. So I'm going to put that one together. I'm going to have to call it, because I can't make claims about addiction. So what I'm calling it is a craving blend. Just know that if I could make you the perfect blend of nootropics that would also help reduce cravings But this is based on the research that I am currently doing. And what I am asking you to do or saying you can do, or what I'm going to do or what I can do, isn't backed by any research anywhere. The only research is that nicotine is a nootropic and enhances your reaction time, working memory, focus, and attention. Based on that research, which I'm linking in our forum, I am saying that it makes sense then that you can use tobacco sprinkled into another herbal blend so that you're dosing very small amounts of it, and that you may be able to avoid the addictive qualities. But the problem with that is, like for me, I've already been addicted to it. So that tells me I may have issues with addiction and nicotine because my brain now knows how to be addicted to it. What I am going to be doing is using my craving relief blend as the base to blend in a little bit of nicotine, and I am going to experiment with it and see if I get my working stuff back, the brain enhancement that I craved to get back, see if it prevents kicking in any kind of addictiveness. There's the other option, and that is to get nicotine lozenges, and I'm going to link to some that I use that help me get off smoking. So I also talk about nicotine, NMN, which is nicotinamide mononucleotide, and it is a precursor in the glycolysis system. You know, when you studied your cell anatomy and you talked about the mitochondria and the Krebs cycle and NAD and NADH. Well, NMN is a precursor to NADH, and I've been using it effectively. It's crazy how well it works. It's also extremely expensive, so I haven't been using it lately. But that, in addition to the lion's mane, I'll put links to all of this stuff in the description of this video. And I'm gonna make another video on Amanita. But I really wanted to talk to you about that guy. I wanted you to go look him up, and there's all of these links are in the forum. So I believe there's a synergistic effect between nicotine and this mushroom. I leave my reasonings why in that post. I love you, beautiful people.